welcome to This Week in Black Media, March 6th, 2019. The video we're looking at here was posted on March 3rd's Ancestral Productions channel. It's called Meet Your Traders, and essentially what it does is I show how the Congressional Black Caucus and all of Congress is beholden to the Jewish Lobbying Committee, AIPAC, and how they've essentially sold out the people that they're supposed to represent. All of them have done a written letter of agreement to support Israel, and in so doing, they're supporting the apartheid state there and the horrible crimes that are committed against our Palestinian brothers and sisters, which I argue is just a version of the kind of confrontation that we will deal with here in our government if it's allowed to be normalized in American media. You see, it's a test, so to speak, and you can watch that video and look at my reference to the Overton window if you want to get that. But it's important. We're going to cycle back to this. Basically, it just shows that our representation has sold out, taken their own reparations package, taken their own financial benefit at the cost of the community that they claim to represent. And it's not just the Congressional Black Caucus; it's all members of Congress. With the exception, to his credit, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Kristen Gillibrand, and I'm presuming, not all of them are signed on to that extent, and credit to them for that, but we're going to get to that. So that brings us to, so what we have is we have weak representation that needs to be replaced by representatives with a spine, like Cynthia McKinney, who I referenced in this same video. But that brings us to Tariq Nasheed's video about the Boule is trying to hijack the reparations movement. And what we have is the former system reinforcing Negroes, the black representatives of white European quote unquote white social agenda. They are now participating in the reparations conversation because they have to, whereas before they were what some have referred to as Negro whisperers. They would be able to come in and steer the narrative of any kind of objectionable narrative that was emerging from the black community. They would re-steer it to where their white master, quote unquote white masters, wanted them to. For butter biscuits is what Tariq Nasheed calls it, as an analogy for their reparations package, for their financial benefits that they got for doing that. They've lost their control as Negro whisperers, so to speak, and the new voices of black media. That's a paraphrase or even a literal quotation from Professor Black Truth, but I think it's a proper way of contextualizing it. There's new voices of black media emerging that these former powers, these former handlers of the Negro community that no longer have the reins anymore. And we see this re-emphasized, and it's not a single leadership. You see, this is a movement of consciousness, and we see that exampled by a similar video that was produced by Antonio Moore, where he states why reparations demands will not come from the mainstream. And this video here refers to the mainstream, the former black-faced representatives of European social agenda and Jewish lobbying powers. They're rightfully being replaced, and now rather than controlling the narrative, we see them parroting the narrative that is emerging from the real voices of the African community here in America, and they're doing a poor job at it because they're not educated in the subject matter. They're not built for it. You see, there's a difference, and Yvette Carnell mentioned that in the video recently also. They're not built for it. You see, it's not all they do. You see, what they do is they get assignments to discuss specific issues the way that their European handlers want them to, whereas the voices that are emerging now in black media, they're built for it. You see, I don't need a script. You have a conversation with me, I'll go off the top, and I will deal with you. You see, and when it comes to the reparations data, Yvette Carnell and Antonio Moore will do the same. When it comes to the reparations data, Dr. Claude Anderson will do the same. You see, there's a difference between expertise and socializing. You see, there's a difference between expertise and popular culture. You see, and there's a huge difference, and it's vast. The Breakfast Club, Angela Rye, the other pundits, the other black faces of European social agenda, they're not built for it. It's not all they do. You see, and they will wilt before knowledgeable voices. That just is what it is. You see, all you have to do is listen to someone talk. Dr. John Henrik Clarke said a long time ago, I can tell what you know by what you read. I can tell what you know by who you quote. The same goes, you can tell what a person knows by their talking points. You see, you can tell. So the Boule representation, they've been good at social positioning for themselves. You see, they're not built for this. So, that brings us to this video by Dr. Boyce Watkins, where he points out that Bernie Sanders has an issue with black people. And he does. I like Bernie. If Bernie supported reparations for American descendants of slaves, he would be my first pick, him and Tulsi Gabbard. I like Tulsi Gabbard, but I don't believe she's going to support reparations either, so I can't deal with them. And I would even venture to say that Bernie's saying that reparations are divisive is racist. It's a racist act itself. To say that the American descendants of slaves do not deserve reparations specifically for them and for their suffering, I suggest is racist because it doesn't respect the humanity of the American descendants of slaves. It does not. Compassion and regret was shown to the Jewish descendants of the Holocaust and the survivors of the Holocaust. Rightfully so. I will always say that. Rightfully so. They deserve every penny. You see, but I do not want anybody from that group to say that we do not deserve ours, because I will. I will throw it right back at them. You are racist. Your humanity was worth compensation. You were worth being compensated for crimes that can never be paid for the cost that you paid, but you say that we don't deserve it. Moreover, many of you will not acknowledge your own involvement in our enslavement. That's a different tangent, but we're going to get into that because that's where it's going. So I argue that it's racist for Bernie to say it's divisive. And even if it is divisive, so be it. It's the right thing to do. No black vote for Bernie. No black vote for Bernie. This brings us to Kamala Harris. And says she will not have a policy specifically for black people. No vote for Kamala. No vote. They don't deserve the vote. They don't respect our humanity. They don't respect what we've been through. I believe anybody that's educated at the history, there's no argument to be made there. The evidence is overwhelming. We have been conspired against by this government from the moment we set foot here. From the moment of our enslavement. Yeah, not from the moment we set foot here, but from the moment of our enslavement, depending on the narrative that you have. And it has been aggressive. And it has been vile, and it has been the worst crime against humanity collectively in the written record, and nothing can stand up to that. Not to get in a contest of suffering, but we have to remember that. So that brings us here. And we're going to come back up here to this video here, why reparations demands will not come from the mainstream. But Elizabeth Warren includes Native Americans in reparations conversation. I'm all for the natives being compensated for the horrible things. I've done a lot of reading on that, a lot more than even most native people that I've talked to. And I'm not saying that. I've studied it a lot. It's horrible what happened, and they deserve every penny too. But we can't forget that they were also compensated, many of them, with land. Not all of them got the benefits that those that built casinos did, but they've received some form of compensation. You see, and we see that some of them treated their black relatives really horribly. when it came time for them to get their compensation. Dr. Claude Anderson shows that. You see, but they got something. You see, so I reiterate, when it comes to I believe all poor people should be compensated. The inequality of wealth here in this country is despicable. The way that our poor people live is despicable. It's a shame. It's an embarrassment to the global community with the wealth that is here. But here again, no one deserves center stage about financial compensation like the American descendants of slaves. And the memory of that must be reiterated again and again and again. So here we come to Nancy Pelosi says they're ready to have a talk about it. A talk about reparations. Well, that's not good enough if there's not something there tangible, to use a Tariq Nasheed term. Talking about it doesn't do any good. John Conyers has talked about it for years and put a reparations discussion bill that had an apology included. You see, but always, most of the videos that I've seen him, he always followed that with, we are not talking about money. Then why are you talking at all? Get out of the conversation. You see, talking about it isn't good enough. We have to know that something's going to happen, or no vote. I said months ago, before anybody I've seen mention it, that we have the swing vote, that people had been neglecting that. Well, wow, do we see it emerging now? So, how do we maintain our motivation? Here's a key point of interest I want to come back here that is very, 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 very important. From my educational background and my historical background, this video here, and I'm going to run some of the images. I'm going to run 2 of the images. In this video, Antonio Moore places images of our ancestors being sold and images of the beatings. Yeah, I believe it's a beating image too. We'll see, because I'll put them up there. But that is the most powerful aspect, in my opinion, of this whole movement, is that we continually use the images of our suffering in the conversation, that we bombard those that would contest us with those images, that we immortalize our suffering to the degree, beyond the degree, that our Jewish cousins do with the Holocaust. No one says the Holocaust came a long time ago. They wouldn't dare. No one says that was a long time ago, get over it. Yet they turn around and have the audacity to say that to us. When we've never even been compensated? I don't think so. We need to immortalize our suffering. We need to bombard them with the lack of humanity in which our people were treated in an organized fashion for over 400 years. Period. Those images are important. Keeping those images in our consciousness are important as motivation. It is important to remember. That is a lesson learned from our Jewish cousins. We must never forget, and they have tried to guide us to forget. You have some schools trying to say that it was indentured servitude, the slaves, rather than calling them slaves. That's never going to fly. Shows the arrogance of those that have tried it. But indeed, we are immortalizing our suffering, and we must never stop until we are compensated for things that can never be compensated for. Our Holocaust is longer, larger, and more overwhelming than any form of human suffering, organized human suffering we've ever seen in the history, in the historical record. How dare anybody say we don't deserve it, or that it was a long time ago? No, our humanity must be respected. And Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, if she is indeed trying to clump us with our Native American brothers and sisters, they fail to see that. So Nancy Pelosi, they got to do more than talk. And that brings us to what's going to get talked about and what I'm predicting and what I've tried to talk about and what I will continue to talk about. This video here, where a 12-year-old boy is charged for selling his CDs, I'm going to go off in a segment where Vicky Dillard talks about, though. She talks about the history of the Jewish involvement in the slave trade. You see? Because when it comes to compensation, when it comes to reparations, we have to have that conversation. And it is a powerful point to point out their hypocrisy. You see, it is a powerful point. We need to ask members of the ADL, do they support reparations for Black Americans? We need to ask AIPAC, do they support reparations for the American descendants of slaves, whom their relatives participated in? Glaringly in the historical record. I'm going to show that. It's out there. It's been done. There's no argument against it. And to call it anti-Semitic, to bring it up, is ridiculous. Particularly when you're talking about other Semites. Oh yeah, I'm going to go there. And I'm going to hop in their Bible to show it. See, we left our signatures there. That's what my argument is. Line up the rabbis. Let's bang. That's a different tangent, but it's coming in August. So that brings us to the other half of European racism. You know, we always put that white male face on it, but in all actuality, right behind it, we have the European female. Here we have a white political leader, a European political leader calling a black district a nigger district. And then here we have, with the blackface politician, where his wife, look at the demon behind the demon. You see, where she hands cotton to black children at a museum, trying to reinforce the marginalized view of black descendants of slaves that they want to keep. That's why they only teach about the civil rights movement. That's why they only teach about us as being slaves and nothing else. They're trying to maintain that narrative that places them in a position of superiority. You see, they've been trying to do that at every juncture. How can they try to marginalize us? It's because we've had weak leaders that have allowed them to. No more. So that brings us to this video here from Everybody Hates Angel. It says, black people invented everything. Well, that's a broad spectrum synopsis of the video. It shows our long history of inventions. Why is that important? Because these inventions completely contradict the dishonest narrative that the European is trying to reiterate in their actions. And this also includes we have the same European female racism in a large degree in our schooling system. You see, Dr. Boyce Watkins did a video on that last week, addressing that, showing the statistics of the white females that are teachers in the black community. Most of them have racist views. Most of them, even the ones that think they're liberal. And that has an effect on the way they teach our children. And many of them are just as despicably racist as this woman here. So they're in there with that overseer mentality. And the last thing they want to do is point out our history of black inventions. What does this have to do with reparations? Everything. Because if we recall this video here of this inventor from Nigeria, I made the argument, and I suspect that he comes from a stable, wealthy family in Nigeria that had the financial infrastructure for him to evolve and develop his natural intellectual capacity. What would reparations do? It would allow us to do that. Many of the inventors we see here did so under the guise of Jim Crow. Even some of them even before slavery ended. Still inventing, still creating. You look at our influence in the music industry. Professor Black Truth did a video not long ago talking about the Latin appropriation of the African music industry. Where I have to say the African drum beat is embedded in the DNA of the Latino anyways. You see, but it is true. Our creativity in music transcends. It's in country music. You have rap country now. We influence everything. We influence technology. What we haven't been able to do is have the financial infrastructure to do it large scale. And when you look at the population statistics, what we will find is that we're going to be flooding the universities anyways. We're going to be flooding the universities anyways. We're going to re-narrate ourselves. We're going to kick these European people out of the historical writing of our history. Banished is what they will be. It's already happening. They've lied about us. They've lied about who we are, and equally important, and more astoundingly, they've lied about who they are. You see? Because an accurate historical analysis of African history necessitates the rewriting of racist European history. This brings us to Bedfellows' video here, that we can afford reparations, and it shows the welfare state of Israel and how we spend millions of dollars every year supporting people that are already wealthy, and throughout the Middle East. When we do a comparative analysis of the dollar amount that goes to an Israel citizen compared to an African in America, it's appalling. And we will see that AIPAC works hard for all of that. Lastly, we see that Brother Phil mentions this up here, that reparations, part of what they're afraid of, perhaps most of all of what they're afraid of, is it will put us in a position to compete with them. See? And this goes into my tangent about fractal cultures and Africans' natural ability to manifest their own ancient social cycles. You see, some might say ancestral productions, you're off on a tangent there. Support that. I will give a comparative analysis. What I will do, I'm into pattern recognition. I've stated that before. You look at Tulsa, Oklahoma. You look at the community that generated there naturally by those Africans there at that genre during that time, immersed in that racism, to the fact that the Europeans around them burnt it down. It shamed them so bad that they were so weak and ineffective collectively compared to that blackness that was shining and growing. I say that's what we do anytime we have financial infrastructure. Anytime there's enough of us that tap into our natural social organization patterns. We are fractal people. It goes without argument, and we organize the same way. But we cannot initiate that when we don't have our basic hierarchy of needs met. But even then, the hierarchy of needs don't need to be met if we're all on the same mental iteration, if we're all on the same code, so to speak. Even that changes things. So, time will tell with all of this. But this is how I see it. This is how I see it. And it's good. It's never been better. The consciousness is growing. It's rising. And I suspect it has to do with the sincerity of the voices that are chiming now. I really do. So, until next week, as always, continue to watch and support Black media.